Failure doesn't exist. It's a myth. It's one of the biggest lies you've been programmed to believe since childhood. And believing in it is exactly what's keeping you broke, stuck, and small. You've been told your whole life there are two outcomes: success or failure, win or lose. But what if I told you that's false, that failure has never been real at all? For 365 days, for every test, venture, attempt I studied, what the world calls failure is, in reality, something else. The only place failure exists is in language. In your mind, think about this. When you were a baby learning to walk, you fell hundreds of times. Did your parents say, "You failed"? Guess walking isn't for you. No. Each stumble was feedback. Adjust. Try again. Walk today. You walk without thinking. Why? Because you never labeled those failed steps as failure. You labeled them as progress. We only start believing in failure later, when school, society, and bosses plant the poison. In school, teachers write big red X's on mistakes: fail, wrong, sit down. Instead of seeing errors as training data, we get punished. We start to think, I can't, I shouldn't. If I fail, I'm worthless. That seed grows into adulthood, where most people don't even try things. Not because they can't succeed, but because they're terrified of failing. They're prisoners of an illusion. Successful minds see something different. Edison asked about his 1,000 attempts to make the light bulb, said, "I didn't fail. I found 1,000 ways that didn't work." Dyson made over 5,000 prototypes of vacuum cleaners before one hit. Was that 5,000 failures? No. That was 5,000 prototypes closer to success. The Wright brothers crashed planes again and again, and each crash carried the data that finally gave us flight. None of these innovators believed in failure. They believed in tuition life, charging you lessons before rewarding you with results. Here's the trick. Failure isn't real, but the belief in failure is deadly. Most people give up, not when they're incapable, but when they interpret feedback as a final loss. That's why it keeps you poor in money, opportunities, relationships, self-worth. You kill your chances after the first rejection. You call your first business flop failure instead of training. You call heartbreak failure instead of education. Every time you stamp failure on feedback, you shut the loop early and stay on the same level. During this experiment, I tested it directly. I decided for 90 days, nothing in my life would count as failure. Everything was either a win or a lesson. First week, I pitched an idea at work that was shot down. Normally, that would sting. This time I documented lesson: idea not clear enough, audience not ready. I refined, repitched, later boom accepted. Not failure, feedback. Another time, I tried learning coding. First attempts were disasters, bugs everywhere. Instead of saying I failed, I reframed. These errors are the tuition I pay to learn a skill with infinite upside. By week 6, what used to depress me started to excite me. Errors meant growth. But here's where it gets shocking. When you strip the word failure from your brain, your actions multiply. I started trying more, testing more, risking more. Why? Because when loss no longer carries shame, you're free. And freedom to experiment is exactly how the wealthy, the successful, the fulfilled operate daily. They are simply playing a bigger game with more attempts. Ordinary people fear failure and make 5 attempts in life. Extraordinary people ignore failure and make 500. Who has more wins at the end? Psychology proves this. Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset versus fixed mindset shows it clearly. People with growth mindset see challenge as a test bed, not a verdict. Neuroplasticity ensures your brain rewires when faced with mistakes. Meanwhile, fixed mindset thinkers, poisoned by failure, is real. Shut down, play small, shrink. And we wonder why success feels rare. The language of failure is tied to money. 2. How many people never invest because what if I lose it? That mentality guarantees you stay broke. The rich lose money all the time needing ideas, investments, experiments, but they simply rename it: education, tuition, data. Then they double down smarter. Meanwhile, you cling to pennies out of fear, and that fear itself is poverty's leash. By month 2 of reframing, I realized the biggest scam about failure wasn't just money, it was time. People waste years stuck in indecision because of fear of failing, yet those years vanish, chained to nothing. That is failure, not acting. If you try and stumble, you learn. If you never try, you rot. So why is failure keeping you poor? Because wealth follows volume of learning. And learning volume only comes from attempts. By avoiding failure, you avoid attempts. By avoiding attempts, you avoid feedback. By avoiding feedback, you avoid growth. You stay in the cage of comfort while the bold lap you. Let's test this with relationships. Every person you admire who has a healthy marriage, guess what? They failed at dating before finding alignment. Every entrepreneur who built a fortune, guess what? They failed at businesses before striking the right chord. Every athlete winning gold medals. Countless failures stacked into mastery. If they saw those as shameful verdicts, they'd be nobodies, because failure was never the final stop. It was the stepping stone. By month 3, life started to feel radically different. Because failure wasn't in my vocabulary, I had no reason to stop after setbacks. I asked a girl out. She said no. Lesson I tried, new content. It flopped. Lesson I gambled on a small side hustle. It tanked tuition. And each time I grew thicker skin, quicker recovery, sharper strategy. Fear of failure used to paralyze me for weeks. Now, rejection was a 15-minute bruise. That turnaround time alone multiplied my results, because while others hid licking wounds, I was already on attempt number 2. Here's the ultimate truth I discovered. Failure isn't a wall. It's feedback disguised as pain. And pain is the tuition you pay for growth. The people most scared of failure are the people most invested in comfort, in ego protection. But hear this. Ego comfort is the tax the universe charges for mediocrity. A year of obsession over this myth taught me one thing clearly. Every single success story is built upon a mountain of failures. But in hindsight, none were failures. They were simply iterations. Life is a lab, not a verdict. The myth of failure lives only where people quit early. So what should you do? Stop believing in failure. Literally delete the word from your mental dictionary. Replace it with feedback. Replace it with tuition. When something breaks, ask, what's the data? What's the lesson? Not, why did I fail? Because if you truly believe failure exists, you'll stop too soon. And stopping is the only real failure there's ever been. Why is failure a myth? And how is it keeping you poor? Because you're already rich in opportunity, in repetition, potential, in attempts available to you. The only poverty is thinking mistakes are endings when they were meant as beginnings. Let me end with this. You will stumble, you will be rejected, you will lose money, you will look dumb, you will trip, you will fall. That's life. But you only become poor financially, emotionally, spiritually. When you call those endings the wealthy, the fulfilled, the free, they never call them failure. They call them tuition. They pay it gladly because they know what comes next is worth it. Failure never existed. Only feedback did. And the moment you finally believe that, you'll realize you were never failing. You were always training.